I think this is everybody. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. You had a choice in which session to come to, and I think you made probably the wrong one, so that's cool. There's still time. You can, I won't be offended. So yeah, right up front, I'm going to tell you that the title that I put on the website for this presentation is probably the worst possible title. I have some slides at the end talking about library-specific things. If we get to it, great. Otherwise, I've tried to keep it as general as possible, and then we can go into the library side of things. And then the Drupal 8 is also sort of a lie. So I would characterize this presentation as a underprepared presentation about being prepared, the importance of being prepared. So without further ado, so the first bullet point in what I promised you on the website was the discovery and planning process, and I'd really like to delve into that. So before I go any further, is anybody here planning a Drupal website in the near future? All right. I wouldn't have ever guessed that Pat was doing that. So what discovery is it's the process by which you get all of the information that you need in order to start doing website-y things. So it kind of looks a little bit like this. I tried to make it a little bit more complex than it really has to be, but you start on the left-hand side and you get info. So that's collecting things from the client. It's poring over documents, those sorts of things. And then this is split into 3 rows for synthesize, because there are a number of stakeholders who are working together to generate the synthesis of the information that you've gathered. So the designer, the developer, project managers, and content strategists, and all the other people who, even if that's not their formal role, that's their role in the project, working together as a team to build out a set of deliverables that get sent off to the client. And then there's this big gate with a green line through it. I was pretty proud of the send to back to get that below the get approved button. Move it so. The approval process, as another slide's going to indicate, is probably the most important little piece here for ensuring the success of a project. And then once you get past that point, you've got options on how you can phase out the project. So if you want design to occur before development and then go into theming, you can make that more linear. But you also have the option of designing while you do the back-end development, and then everybody meets up at the end and starts doing the theming side of things. And then other stuff left intentionally vague, and I'll show you in a second why. So the inputs that you would get in that get info, the very first left-hand side thing, is the designer will seek from the client basically very feel-y stuff, how somebody looks at web design in general, so that they can make an output that matches those expectations, and sort of the, if your business were a shoe, what kind of shoe would you be? Those sorts of questions to get an idea of what the design outputs should look like. The developers have the important job, they always do. They get as much of the information that the site is going to eventually have, and then figure out a way to winnow it into tables. So in Drupal terms, that would be your content types, your taxonomies, your entity types, figuring out a way to take, oh, we have these events, we have blog posts, we have pages, and turn that into a set of content types and fields that matches the org structure of a particular website. And then on the other side of things, that this is where your project managers and your content strategists want to get the things that they can use to get started working on things. And to me, there's I haven't delved a whole lot into some of those aspects of projects. So to me, there's a certain amount of magic that goes along with it. I'm like, okay, these guys are doing their thing, and at the end of it, we get something that's useful for implementing SEO tweaks and things like that. So that's the hocus pocus side of things. And then probably equally important to the inputs would be the output side of things. So before even formal design begins, the designer might upfront provide, hey, either you told us what your branding is, or we have helped you do a rebrand. Here's the expectations that you have for what your logo and things will look like, what your colors are, the sort of core message that you're trying to convey through design, perhaps style tiles at this point. And then wireframes has been an open question at Commercial Progression. I was told to plug that we're hiring, so you can come and talk to people who don't talk good in front of crowds. You can do that. Wireframes is sort of an open question of whether to provide them in the discovery phase or whether to do it early in design. And it really depends on how much bandwidth your designer has. If they can devote time to the wireframing at that point, since it is such an intensive piece, then that's great. If it's going to be a bottleneck, then being realistic about that can be useful. On the developer side of things, mostly I just wanted to write the word block doc, but those three things at the top are the ones that if the developer doing the discovery is different than the developer doing the site build, those three are the ones that they're just going to glom onto and find useful for implementation. I've got this asterisk next to the implementation notes here. So there are a few different ways that this, it's this huge umbrella that is one line in this presentation. It could be user stories, a more formal functional specification, or really just a page of notes, depending on the size of the project, the scope of the project, and then what is going to be done with those notes. So has anybody done a process that involved user stories? Oh, yeah. So the idea with a user story is it's so in the world of specifying the function of something, it's kind of like iambic pentameter. It's a particular style of poetry for that. In journalism, the analogy would be like it's the 5 W's. You're saying who's doing something, where are they when they do it, what are they doing, and then like the other parts are always less important. But so you're writing out the actual thing that somebody would do on the website and what's expected to happen when they do that thing, and criteria for how that particular action can be accepted by the client at the end of the project. So user stories is one method of that implementation side of things. The entity doc, view doc, and block doc is really more of a technical specification as opposed to a functional one. And then the question mark with BHAT tests is, if you've seen BHAT, is anybody familiar with it? So it's a behavior-driven design or a behavior-driven development testing tool, and it takes like pseudo English user stories, and you can just run them as tests. So as long as you write really like precisely worded user stories, you can dump that into a file and run it, and the website will tell you whether or not you're meeting the criteria that are necessary. So you can kind of merge implementation notes with BAT tests in some circumstances. But that is overhead, and so for a very small project, that level of testing might not be entirely necessary. And so then on the other side of things, I've been on this slide far too long, but the inputs and the outputs sort of match up. If you're getting workflow information, you can make a project plan. If you're getting initial copy, you can create a content strategy. If you're getting strategic information from the client, you can turn that into a marketing plan or an SEO plan. And if you're getting magic from the client, you can, I don't know, try to one-up the magician. So I guess this applies pretty much for anything ever, but making sure that the designer is ready to go into the design phase with all the information that they need. It's never going to be exact. There's always going to be a phone call, but being as thorough as possible and documenting the places where the thoroughness fell through so that the next time you can do it better. That's always important. And then making sure that the designer's talking to the developer, making sure that the client is always in contact. Probably one of the biggest risks in any project is always, the client goes on vacation, or somebody is the bottleneck in the timeline. So keeping everybody in contact and making sure that contingencies are prepared for is, and that's very Eisenhower-like. That's the, plans are useless, but planning is essential kind of thing. Oh, and then that middle, that gate. So you can hand off a document a lot of times and say, hey, this is what we're going to build. Is this okay with you? And they'll say, sure, we want you to get started on this yesterday. But if they don't read through and know exactly what they're approving, then that document doesn't mean a lot. And so some of the bigger failures when it comes to having a thorough discovery and then having an end product that meets the criteria of the discovery was, well, that's not really what the client wanted in the first place. So nailing all that down and getting a hard approval is key to a solid discovery process.
Hey, Brad.
It's bad. Oh yeah, by the way, guys, ask questions.
What are some of the things you guys do to nail that down? Because a lot of the clients don't understand the terminology that you guys are speaking about and so forth. So how do you make them read like a 35 to 75 page document?
Yes, that's a very good question. I don't have a complete answer, but just making sure that people feel comfortable coming to you with those questions. Like, there's no dumb question. Making sitting down with people and really pouring over line by line if it's necessary. And even if that's not a possible piece of it, having some kind of gotcha questions. Do you know the story of Van Halen and the brown M&Ms? So that was put in their rider so that they could tell whether the venue was paying attention. So if you can ask a question and say, what did you think of the color field on the blog post, and there isn't one in there, then you know that they're not being thorough in looking at stuff. So that's kind of a trick that you can kind of pull. So this section focuses specifically on those 3 docs in the dev section. I am a developer. I think that it's the most important part of anything ever. So that's the focus here. At the end of a process, a client is satisfied, the developer is satisfied, it's a win when a website isn't too complex and a pain in the butt, more or less. And getting there often means simplifying things. And so if you can provide sort of the Einsteinian version of any given information architecture, there's, it's as simple as it can be, but no simpler. That would be the ideal situation going into back-end development and then applying a design to it. So information architecture feeds back into design, and so a lot of those middle column documents for the development also apply for the designer to be able to say, oh, well, I can't put a field in there that doesn't exist. And here's where I use a really terrible metaphor. There's often sort of an undue emphasis on sitemaps when it comes to information architecture. In Drupal, you have a menu system. It's a well-known fixed value of a system that you can put values into and make a bunch of menu items and turn them into big tree structures. And that's what you're working with. And so if you set some real world constraints to it, it turns into a powerful way to create a sitemap. So a lot of the things here are more guidelines than hard rules, but anytime that you break the rule, it might come back to bite you. So on many sites, you can get away with just using main menu. And then if you have to display the menu in different contexts, then you can use the menu block module to do that. But you're working from a single structure for a website. And then if you need additional menus, typically you wouldn't need more than 3 for this. So maybe the top in the header for having utilities, and then the footer you might want a separate menu of some kind. But between 1 and 3 total menus for anything but a ridiculously complex website is probably overkill. And then the first level of menu items. All right. Well, we know the water's cold, so that's good. Psychology would tell you, but just for short-term memory purposes, 7 items is about the ideal number of things to anywhere between having a single main menu item, which seems kind of useless, and 7 items that would be a system of categorization for the sub-menu items. And then the branches that come off of that, like if you have the main level and then like a single drop-down, that's fairly industry standard. If you have a second level of drop-downs, that starts to run into some usability, some user experience things. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend more than 3 layers unless, once again, you have a really, really complex site. And then you can have as many links as you want once you get past that first layer. The more that you have, obviously, the more that users will have to browse to find things. And just to put this in context, your menu, your sitemap is a browsing affordance. So if you have browse and search together, then different people with different information seeking behaviors will find the thing that they are most used to using. Yeah, and then the little note at the bottom here is that this doesn't really make much sense at all because the branches are themselves leaves and stuff. Yeah, doesn't matter. So then the next piece of the information architecture is this is an example of a single content type that would show up in your entity doc for architecting on a site. So if you have something called an event, it's most likely going to have a description, a date, and a location along with a title. We almost always put imagery on every site that we do, so having a splash image can come in handy for placing it in different contexts. So if you wanted to show it in a view block later, there you go, you have images and you can thumbnail it out. So having the most important piece of this is, wait, I have a slide for this. Why am I telling you now? There we go. Making sure that the fields that you're choosing are the right fields to pick. So everything in Drupal is sort of text, even if that text is a number or if it's an address or a link, or like it's all text. So you could really do a field spec and all of the things in square brackets could say text. And then when you go to do any other implementation, you would be in the tall grass. It would be the worst. So picking the right field types up front for the information that you're storing and making sure that the content type describes the thing that you're storing in it rather than where it's placed or how it looks or any of those things. If you get that structure right, then all of the other stuff is far easier. So we had an example not too long ago where we were going to write out the data structures based on mock-ups that we had received. And we were using the labels from the mock-ups for the names of the content type. So there's one that was called like main nav page, and one called sub nav page, and one called resource page. And all of those things are pages. So you would have one content type. So there are a lot of gotchas and traps, and unfortunately it takes a lot of making mistakes to finally sort of coalesce on picking the right fields up front. So that's where the main advice comes in, is hire a good architect. It will hit you as an upfront cost in the beginning, but hopefully it would pay dividends over the life of the project and the site and going into the next site even. So I've been on both sides of this where I've done the planning and handed off documents to developers and then saw how they reacted and how they built sites off of those documents. And then I've been the guy receiving those documents and building sites off of them. And I know that, personally at least, I'm lazy. So if they hand me something, I'm going to build what they hand me. If you leave ambiguity in the architecture of a site up front and tell a developer to build it, they're going to build it the way that they think that they should. And so that can get you panels, which is the worst module that's ever existed. No, I'm just, it's not my favorite. You'll get all kinds of issues because things weren't thought of ahead of time. So yeah, please hire a good architect to make your sites. I'm begging you. I inherit sites from previous vendors, and it's rarely a pleasant experience. So for me, please just do that. So this is, I kind of already alluded to this. I have a confession. I made the proposal for this presentation with great optimism that I would be able to show you marked progress on a library website that was built in Drupal 8, and that's been a little bit slower going than hoped. So, hence less focus on libraries and less focus on Drupal 8. So I'm going to speed over the technical considerations when it comes to Drupal 8, and then do a brief slide on what I remember from the Drupal 7 days. We're sort of in a Wild West time. It's less wild than it was at the end of last year. Things are getting their full releases. It's settling in. The inclusion of so many common modules into core has really eased this process compared to the Drupal 7 one. In 2011, Drupal 7 came out, and then Views wasn't ready for a long time. So having Views in core has eased this problem considerably, and there's so many other great things about Drupal 8. But there are still good things that are at various stages of pre-release. If you're uncomfortable running a dev version of a module or an alpha or a beta or anything like that, then you might still want to wait. I'm not recommending that, but if that's the mandate for making sure that you have code that's at a full release state, then there's still some time for that. There's still some ambiguity in the community about things like, should we use paragraphs or should we use ECK with inline entity form? And you're going to make a decision along the way when it comes to planning a Drupal 8 project at this point that's going to be wrong, and there's not really anything you can do about it, so you might as well keep charging forward. The Drupal 8 release strategy is different from 7, where you can get some major updates when point releases come out. So make sure in support planning that you have time to take care of that with your development strategy. And then the more that you can separate out like the theming side of things from the core structure, the happier everybody's going to be. I said atomic-ish because I don't know if I really buy into putting words on this. Who's familiar with atomic design? Oh, cool. All right. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. So cool. So really, the ignoring all of the good work that people have put into atomic design, I'm going to really bastardize it and distill it into this. And this is sort of a Drupal side of things too, in a workflow piece. Has anybody heard of mobile first design? Okay, so this is sort of the same principle. With mobile first, you're taking the simplest full interface that you have, and then building up from there. And so the workflow from design into theming should work the same way. You would theme out the simplest possible interface, and then add on from there using the CSS. And there's really like when it comes to media queries in CSS, there's literally either a bottom up or a top down approach that you can take. So it's a one-to-one mapping there. So with atomic design, it's not even, hey, this is what the mobile version of the site will look like. This is what a particular component on the page will look like. And so the same thing applies when it comes to theming, is get all of your base styles out of the way and then move on to the bigger and bigger pieces until you get there. So this really seems to apply across the board, and it seems to work far better than trying to go from a top-down approach. The small stuff, HTML tags, what are each of the individual headers going to look like? What do links look like? If you get those two out of the way, then you're halfway home. But there's like if you look at the HTML spec, there's all kinds of stuff to style there. And one note here, when it comes to buttons specifically, but the principle works the same way, is like a button looks like a button. And so if you make the button at the base level look like a specific button that might be bolder or bigger or something, like a special call to action, then when you have to go and implement just a regular looking button, you'll be screwed. So don't do that at the HTML tag level. Make sure your buttons look like buttons and your links look like links early in that process, and just apply the brand colors and fonts and things like that. So anyone familiar with ARIA roles? Okay. What I think, besides the accessibility of ARIA, that was really cool about the spec is that they identified all of these UI components that aren't a single thing in HTML. So like tabs or menus and things like that. These are things that people do all the time. And so if you look at the list of ARIA roles, that's a great place to start building out what components should be available for a site. Then the best piece of object-oriented CSS, since I don't know how much CSS you guys do, people have moved to SMAX and BEM and all these other things, but the cool thing in 2009 about OOCSS was the media object, and it's something that you see everywhere. It's like, here's a picture or a video, a title, and some text. And almost every node is that. So the media object as a thing is a great single piece to style early. And then if you've used the style guide module, it covers these first three things, and it covers very Drupal-specific implementations of those things. So you can use the style guide module as a theming tool for that. So yeah, once those things get designed out, if they're different in the mockups and then the mockups get approved and then the themer has to build off of those, and there's a whole bunch of really weirdly specific things in there, that's a problem. It really adds on to the project. So the design, the style guide, the mood board, the individual early pieces is really important to then be dropped and used into the mocks themselves. I saw this article yesterday about the redesign of the Mastercard logo. Have you seen the new one? So it's the two circles, the red and the yellow circle. Well, they took a whole bunch of sort of the flourishes out of it. It's just two circles, and then the middle part is orange, and then below it they put the word Mastercard in lowercase and turned it from white to black, and new font. That's the end. And you could look at it on first look and go, wow, that's really like lazy, right? Like, it's two circles. I bet you that they paid $1 million to get this new logo. But it's like a brilliant design. It enforces the brand. It accomplishes what they need to do out of it, and it works in a whole bunch of different contexts. It's a really good logo redesign. And so I mentioned that story specifically because I love when designers are lazy, or when it looks like designers are lazy. So this is the section distinct from the rest of my opinions earlier in the presentation, where I was going to talk about libraries specifically, and I know that I promised you at least one library term. So when it comes to building out and designing a library website, still in 2016, it's amazing how underemphasized catalog search can be sometimes. And then, and for your notes, that would be opaque would be a word to. And then word choice, research seems to be pretty like a better word than databases. Removing library lingo unless through card sorting or through other exercises you find that your patrons actually know what those words mean. And that's an interesting piece in that other column from the inputs and outputs of the discovery process. So I put this third line in because I was real tired last night. I don't really want to smack talk on any library services. But I remember, I've been out of the library game for a few years, but I remember that some of the ebook services were just such a pain that I wouldn't want to walk a patron through them to get them to the point of checking out a book. I don't know if you have to justify your budgets, you have to do all those sorts of things. If something is tough or bad, don't like throw it out, but like make sure that the emphasis is in the right place for the various services that you provide. So I guess prioritization is the word that I would use for that entire spiel. Yeah, and then in terms of front page hierarchy, it changes from public to academic and even in an individual community, but typically events are the main content area piece there, and then services, and then some of the online pieces, so databases and things like that. And if we have time, and we don't, then we can talk about some of the nitty-gritty of that sort of hierarchy piece there. And then this is the key term that I remember from here. So there's the 5 laws of, I had to bring up my notes. I'm just going to gloss over that. We're getting into, so then do I have anything for this? Okay, so right when I was about to fall asleep, I realized that this slide actually kind of ties everything together, except that I didn't deliver the presentation that I did when I was rehearsing it. So when it comes to taking that reality and building out the database schema that matches that reality, it really fits into Conway's law, which is, so if you have a company and your company is a president and then 3 vice presidents and then a whole bunch of departments that go off of that, when you make your website will probably be structured a heck of a lot like that org chart. And so it's really kind of sad how true it is. So it's actually this law is sort of a useful tool when it comes to modeling that data and building out those node types and other entity types and figuring out what the design and overall structure of a site would look like. So I don't know that this presentation looks anything like Commercial Progression's org struct, but it works in a macro level. Second time to plug, now that the general manager's here, we are hiring and we can work with us. So yeah, that would apply for extending the core experience, and we've got Canton here. So when it comes to extending the core experience of Drupal in an organizational sense, something like summer reading would be a solid example of that. And you can gamify it, and you can talk to her about it. So we're just 4 minutes over. What's up?
I had a couple questions. Nobody uses their catalog search because it's on a tab system and nobody knows what a catalog is anyway. What is your feeling of the ideal system? I mean, because nobody seems to use tabs. These are default discovery layer. What is your opinion of tabs and the usability? Like people, like way of like dividing up searches that's been traditionally used by libraries.
Okay. I've always advocated the default search to be keyword as Google as possible, and then if the additional tabs are more those, like, as long as the default is something that somebody can really understand easily, then the additional options are just icing on the cake. But yeah, I don't know about tabs. That's interesting.
And the other question is, I'm sure you do your own things. What is your opinion of subtheming, like the top 3, like Zen, Bootstrap, Omega? Do you inherit any sites that are subtheming, and do you retheme them, or do you just go with them?
Sure. I don't hate subtheming. There's just sort of this kind of gooey feeling that the main theme is doing a lot of stuff and you're kind of ignoring it. So that's like having a single theme and knowing that's everything that's accountable for things going out to the screen is going through this thing. Like, that works out really well. But yeah, we inherit sites and stuff, and really in practice, the debugger is going to tell you what's going on. So yeah, and then there's bloat that's associated with it. So if you're using a Bootstrap theme or a Foundation theme or something, then you're going to have a lot more CSS than you might possibly need. But yeah, these are.
Is Zen like the cleanest?
Nowadays, I don't know. Our theme is the cleanest. Compro theme.
Your what?
Compro theme, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Does that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because we don't have like a full time, the staff to, time. At least we haven't. So something is like kind of like a easy leap forward for people who have the man.
Sure, absolutely. Good question. Anybody else? I'll be around, I swear. Thank you very much for coming.